Welcome to We Are Women, Unapologetically, the podcast that talks about the good, bad, ugly, and awesome. Careers, life transitions, confidence, and everything in between. Because shift happens, but you don't have to do it alone.
Welcome to We Are Women Unapologetically. My name is Jessica Cumming, and I am your host. Today, I am joined by Alison Young, who I met through Innovation Women, which is a speaking organization. Alison's story is phenomenal because she was a trained musician that used her hands all of her life, and she was forced into a career transition. She is also a cancer thriver. I love the fact that is how she introduces herself, because she has definitely looked at how to find the message going through the mess. Now, Alison is a professional hiker. This is what she does for a living. And when we were talking, she said, I get paid to do what I love. And she is such an inspiration. So, Alison, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And we are just going to go ahead and jump right in. Go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself and everything that you've accomplished.
Thanks so much, Jessica, for having me on your program. I'll just say that the really brief, Reader's Digest version of my life is that, yes, I was a trained musician. I was a professional flutist. I started, as you can imagine, most musicians do, at a very, very young, tender age. You know, when you're not totally developed in your brain, you're not totally developed in your body even. And so you commit yourself to this kind of life of being a professional. Music is something, dance, any kind of performing arts is so ephemeral. You're always practicing for that next performance because it's something that happens live in the moment. There's even the saying that I hate in the music world, which is probably similar to sport, that says you're only as good as your last performance. So I spent my first part of my life up into my 30s as a professional musician and did a lot of things. I had the opportunity to play with legendary conductors like Leonard Bernstein and in some of the finest concert halls, Carnegie Hall and around the world. And I made a lot of recordings, but I developed a neurological condition in my late 30s called focal dystonia. Dystonia is pretty baffling to scientists. I know that there's a lot of research being done and people say that they're being cured, but mostly it just kind of develops for no reason. Your muscles contract when you're trying to make them do something. They have these odd motions. And at first, when this happened, I just figured I wasn't practicing hard enough. So I kind of doubled down. And over time, it just became obvious that I had something that seriously wrong with me. I tried to rebuild my flute. I tried to do all of the right things. But really, the ease of playing and that real joyfulness that I had as a professional musician were gone. It was almost as though I had an Alzheimer's of the fingers, mostly all in my left hand. During that time, what I did to kind of help myself deal with the loss, deal with the sorrow that I was going through was to walk. I hiked a lot. That was something I always liked to do. But I had to get a job, right? I had to get a career. So I transitioned into something that was very natural for me, into radio. And I worked for 13 years here in Minnesota for Minnesota Public Radio and American Public Media. And it was great. I mean, I was kind of a cheerleader for music. And I found this kind of naturalness of speaking to people, explaining things, sharing stories that you do on air and making things very concise. And I did that for a long time. But all through that period, I would hike as much as I could. And I found myself being attracted to the trail. It's a kind of an odd thing everyone likes to walk, right? But an odd thing to call your career because it's very much alone and it's very spiritual in a lot of ways. It's also contingent on your health and your body. As I age, that becomes more obvious. But what I did was I kept kind of pushing the envelope on how much I could hike, how long I could go away, how much I could be away from the radio. Finally, I felt a need to do a long, long distance hike. So it's like the Appalachian Trail, but it was the Appalachian Trail of New Zealand was the first one I
Oh,
did.
amazing.
That was amazing. So I took a leave of absence and went and did that.
Let me ask you,
Yeah.
how many miles or kilometers is that hike, and how long did it take you to do?
Isn't it crazy? It's almost 2,000 miles. It's 3,000 kilometers. I added some other trails to it while I was there, and I planned to be away for 5 months to do
Wow.
it, which is kind of typical
Okay.
of that length. People who do the Appalachian Trail, people who do the Pacific Crest Trail, unless you're a runner and you're going for a really fast time. Most people, it's around that amount of time. You start in the spring and end in the fall. And it's like a lifestyle. You commit to something like that.
Well, you really have probably the clothes on your back and whatever you can carry. You are looking at not only adding extra pressure on your body, but you have to mentally prepare for what you're going to have available to you for that amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things, like in small ways. It can be you make all this food or something and you send a box ahead with the food that you're going to eat. When you reach a certain town, they'll take you for the next week. And when you get there after so long that you've been hiking, you discover that the food that you've packed, you can't stand it anymore. You don't want to eat hummus, one more bite of it. So like in small ways, it can make you crazy.
Yeah.
And in big ways, it's like, how do you step onto a trail to start it and even have any idea or any feel about what the end is going to be like?
Right.
I mean, you can't focus on that. It's going to be 5 months. You get this kind of sense of where you'll be. You have a return plane ticket, whatever it happens to be. But on that first day, it's overwhelming. And I think that maybe it was more helpful to be an older person and to have gone through some loss, to have experienced the growth of my playing career. And aside from the fact that I could play anymore because of dystonia, when you do something like a musical instrument, when you make that your career, when you become a performing artist, yes, you may be only as good as your last performance, but inside your head, it has to be that every single day has ups and downs. This is true for people in sports too. You have a day you just don't feel quite right. You're tired, or things aren't quite clicking. You have a bad day.
I think that not just sport.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, but that
everyone.
whole psychology, like you have to be up like right now, you got to do this thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so the whole psychology of just pulling it together and making something happen, no matter what's going on around you, that's of course a kind of resilience.
Yeah.
But also being in a mindset of every day brings what it brings. I mean, it may start out bad and then something beautiful happens later. On the Te Araroa, that's the name of the trail. In Maori, it means the long pathway. On the Te Araroa, I learned pretty much every lesson about life. You're thrown into deep mud right at the beginning, and you have sand flies. I even give a talk about some of the lessons. The sand fly is like a black fly that we have here in North America, very tiny, but they bite you. And the welt doesn't show up for 3 days afterwards. It's like having poison ivy. And what's so funny about it is I just thought this is this terrible thing. No one tells you about it in the New Zealand, Chamber of Commerce. Pure New Zealand ads are just like, oh, no, it's beautiful here. And then you get there and you realize there's this horrible bug. But what I found was that the Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, have created myths around why there's a bug, why it exists, why the sandfly is there. And there's sort of two different stories. One of them has to do with the fact that the place is so beautiful. It's such an Eden that a human being would want to be there forever. And the fly teaches you that your time is limited. You are. It's a harsh lesson that that we're mortals, and it's like, whoa. So that's kind of one of the lessons, which I think applies to so many things. I mean, any transition that we have, any change that we have, we can think about the fact that, life, the only thing that's true in life is change,
Right.
is transition. But then there's another story that I've discovered, unlike our mosquitoes or unlike our black flies here, that while you're moving, hiking, will still bite you. The sandfly only bites you when you're stopped. So, of course, you keep moving.
Right.
And so the other myth is that it was for lazy people. The sandfly was to teach you to keep moving, keep working, keep active. And so you could use that full metaphor, kind of a lesson in, how do you manage loss, dystonia, cancer as a terrifying disease? How do you enter that space? And, it can be, we need to keep moving. We need to always look to the next thing, look forward rather than stopping and letting the bugs just completely eat us alive.
I really like both analogies. So thank you for sharing that story. I have lived the sandflies before. I lived in Australia for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I unfortunately did not make it to New Zealand. But something else that you said earlier on is that on that first day, you couldn't focus on the end. And I think that it all ties in together, right? You knew day one you had to focus on the present, what you were going to be doing that day. But then you have these flies that come around and they remind you you're there for a short time, even though it's 5 months in the grand scheme of things. It's a very short period of time. And then you also have them telling you, keep going, keep pushing forward. So I really love those analogies of it all and how it really does all tie together. This was a 5-month journey, but you do this quite a bit now. Am I correct?
It's, it's a variety of lengths of trails. That was a very, very long trail. And when I came back to the States, the folks at the radio station decided they wanted to demote me to be an on-call. It was a little bit of a stressful period. Yeah. I loved being on air. I did a lot of interesting things, hosting live concerts, which were broadcast around the country and be on stage oftentimes. So it was fun for me and I enjoyed it. But I was at a crossroads, so that was going to come to an end. And what I realized in that space was, what do I do now? Who am I now? What can I accomplish? I was in my mid-50s at that point. And I have a very supportive husband. Part of being a resilient person or a person who's able to bounce back, it's really important to have the people in your boat,
yes,
the supportive people. Choose them carefully. Really important in any crisis. It can be job loss. It can be illness. It could be fire, a natural disaster of some sort. You really want those support systems. It's really hard to do everything alone.
Yeah. And I think the important message too is you're doing this by yourself, but you still have this huge support system behind you. And that's an important message, right? Even when we are 100% alone or what we think is 100% alone, we always have people and should have people that we can rely on to help us through it. Right. It is when we feel the most alone, that's when we actually need them the most. And so I wanted to call that out because I think it's so important. And I agree. I have a wonderful support system with my boyfriend and my friends and family as well. Sometimes when you are going through the thick of it, you don't always know how to rely on them or ask.
Oh, yeah. Or ask.
And
right.
I think,
I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but as a solo hiker and as a solopreneur, you have this feeling that somehow you can handle everything.
Yeah.
That you're just, you're like, I'm good. I've got this. And you have to know it's time to say, you know what? I don't.
Yes. No, absolutely.
I haven't.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people, I mean, especially right now with the world that we're living in, and we have seen a lot of layoffs happen. We have seen a lot of job transitions happen. We see a lot of instability just in general. And now more than ever is when we need to not only speak up if we're not okay, but check in on others. Like I just posted on LinkedIn the other day, it was public service announcement. If you have friends that were recently or even not so recently laid off, check in on them. They still need you. And I still have a couple of friends of mine that I talk to very often, but we'll go a couple of days without talking. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, you got to check in. Yeah. God has put in your head to check in on someone. There's a reason for it.
Oh, that's a great reminder. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I knew it was going to be surgeries and then ovary and all of that. And a very wise person said, what you should do is ask for help, right? But tell people what you want from them. And she said the most easy thing of all to do would be, bring food. And I thought, really? Okay. So I had like a little sign up sheet and people brought, it was just for a few weeks when it was like in the worst part of it, I couldn't do anything. And people brought food. And I know it sounds really simple and everybody does that, but oh my God, it was like, Richard could have cooked, my husband, but he was so stressed with all of it. And he didn't want me to know how stressed he was, that to have this thing of ding dong, or like your delivery's here and something arrived and it's like, wow, I don't have to think about this. And that's the one thing you have to do every day is eat.
Yeah.
It's so simple. So if you're looking for how to help someone, who's struggling, food.
Yeah. It's a basic necessity, but it takes time. It takes preparation. It takes going to the store, preparing it. It's something that it's very welcome. No, I would definitely agree with you. I have some friends of ours in the neighborhood, and we typically get together and we have family dinners, forces people to get together. Otherwise, they may be alone. I feel like it's just more than nourishment for the body. It's also for the mind and the soul. And again, very important. So once you found out that you were looking at being put on call for your position, let's go back to there.
I laugh now. It's like gallows humor. It was so destabilizing. And it's funny because I think developing a neurological condition that affected my fingers when I relied on my fingers was truly the lowest point of life. I mean, that was a terrible loss, but it felt like it came from the cosmos. It was just bad luck. It was a cosmic ripoff. I mean, who are you going to blame? There's no known cause for dystonia, so it was just a thing that happened. My bosses decided it would be better if I didn't work there anymore. It was like right in the heart, a dagger. And so, when I was preparing to talk with you about this, one of the things I really want to emphasize when that kind of experience happens, where it's not just numbers. It was like, well, we've just decided you're not right for this, even though you're like, yes, I am. And it does feel personal. I think that everyone should take the time they need to grieve and to not feel ashamed about it. And, when you look at like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her stages of grief, and you supposedly go to different ones, I think it's really important to feel the feels, because if you skip that step, you're thrown into, I need to begin networking. I need to be positive. I need to make money. All of the other steps that you need to take that move you forward. If you're bringing that weight of sorrow or of anger or of confusion, whatever the emotions are, bargaining is one of the things. You're sort of reliving how you could have fixed the problem. It slows you down. It weights you down. And I don't know that we're ever totally finished with our grieving, but it's important to kind of get it out. And whether that's with family or with professionals, also talk to a professional who can guide you through these things, with your church, with your synagogue. I mean, you can find support places, but you don't want to be shamed into saying, oh, but look on the bright side. It's like, there is a moment where you should not look on the bright side. You should be just enraged. And I think it spurs you to action.
Yeah. Living in the moment and not suppressing, but actually naming the season and the feeling that you're going through.
Yes.
But naming the season. Because when you give it a name of what you're going through, it actually takes away from the intensity of the emotion.
Well, it's so beautiful.
Again, not a label, but naming the season that it is, whatever it is. And you're right, because you said that you were in radio for 15 years. For me, myself, I was at Dell for nearly 20. And when it happens, it's your identity. And it is a loss, because not only are you grieving the, let's name it, the income that you had, the job title that you had, it's also your friends. A lot of times that's where our friend base is, because we spend more time at work than we do actually at home. So it really does become this whole identity of you that you have lost. But I think the good news, as you've gone through your hiking and done these different things, you've found, and I know that I have found, even through my podcasts and coaching and the speaking that I do, we're destined for something
Yeah.
more. We may not know it at the time, but it's just like that first step on that trail that first day. You couldn't see the end. But I think that it's important for people to know that you don't have to see the end. You don't have to see the full staircase in order to make the first step. And oftentimes that first step, that is the hardest.
I'd really just want to ask one question. When you say name it with a season, are you talking about like spring, summer, winter, fall?
No, just like whatever personal season, what is this transition that you're going through, or what is this problem or internal battle, whatever it is.
And when you name it, it's like you own it. I talk a lot about resilience is one thing I talk about because of bounce back. So people become resilient. One of the pieces is what's in your personal power. What do you have power over? And you're naming things as you're describing right now. It gives you that sense of I'm in charge of me, my destiny. Yes, they can take the job away. You get sick, other things can happen, but they can't take away my sense of myself, my dignity, or my integrity.
Yeah, and they can't take away your experiences, what you have done, what you have created, and the lives that you've touched. Right? These are all things that I think a lot of times people lose. And it is part of the grieving process to find those things again, because it's all about you are so much more than your job title. And oftentimes we forget that. We forget that we are a mother, a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a pillar in the community, a mentor, all these different things that are so much more than job title.
Right. And, there is that moment where you're saying, okay, what did I do in the job that's transferable skills, which is very important. You have to find a job eventually. But I think that journey to find out what the transferable skills start to tell you who you are.
Oh, yeah. I really feel like we're put on this earth for a reason and for a purpose. And that's why when I talk about in my story personally, when I first got laid off, I was shocked, but I had already started to reclaim parts of my life that I had pushed aside. And so for me personally, it took me a while. I took a month off. I didn't tell anyone I was laid off except for a few people. I didn't announce it on LinkedIn, nothing. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to reconnect with myself. I wanted to figure out who I was, and I wanted to figure out what's next. Because as soon as you put it on LinkedIn, as soon as you tell your friends and family, as soon as it's out into the universe, what's the first question you get? What's next?
And then they start telling you who you are.
Exactly. And if you haven't had time to process yourself and go through the grieving process, you can't answer those questions, and it can become a very dark place. I think that's when people start to shut down because they don't know how to respond. It's almost as though they are ashamed of the season that they're going through. So that's why, again, I say name it, not label, because when we say label something, there's a negative connotation with it. But by naming it, you're taking back and you're claiming the power of the situation that's tied to it.
So I have to tell you the really weird thing that happened. All the dust settled. It went very fast, but it took a few months to work things out. And I had no idea what I was going to do. Like most of us, I didn't have a plan, and I didn't have an idea. And my husband said to me, "You should go on another hike." I was like, "Are you crazy? I've been gone for 5 months. What will people think?" And he's like, "Who cares? You're 100% boss free." And I thought, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. He's like, "You're free." And I got very worried about money, of course. Most of us do, because now your income's gone. And it's gone. Nothing. I didn't have any prospect. I'm going to give a lot of credit to him. He did something very important for me, which I think is a really, for people who are artistic and don't always think of spreadsheets. He made a spreadsheet and put all of our money, what we had, what we owed, what was being saved for retirement, put it down there. And then you could look at it and see how much did you have, and of course expenses on another page. How much do you need to make? It's not like how much do you want to make,
Right.
but how much do you have to make to stay in your home, pay for the lights, and still be able to hike and stuff. So that was really important because it was physical. I could fold it. It was tangible. It wasn't just my brain going in circles. And so that was very tangible. But he added one other thing, which is why you want to pick people correctly. At the end, he had the doomsday clock. And the doomsday clock, well, if we make this much money per month, we can last this many years. And it went all the way out where it's like if we made a good living, we can last 96 more
Oh my
years.
gosh.
It was kind of crazy. But he had a lot of fun with that piece. And it gave me, the grieving kind of hysterical part.
Mhm.
It's just like, let it out, get it out, be in your space, be sad, be happy. But then there was the kind of concrete part. And then there was this pushing me out of my comfort zone. Go back and another hike, you're 100% Wall Street. The hike I wanted to do was an American hike, Pacific Crest Trail, which is beautiful. It's California, Oregon, Washington. And it was already late in the year at that point. So there was no way I could go to the south. It was too hot. I had to start Washington. So what I'd planned to do was I was only going to do a little bit, just going to go for a few weeks. I still need to make food and send boxes ahead of time that I would pick up. So I had to have a little bit of planning. But it was just like, be careful. I'll come home if it's not going to work out. And I got through Washington. It was beautiful, amazing. I got into Oregon, and you crossed this beautiful bridge over the Columbia River. And it's very symbolic. Cheryl Strayed speaks about crossing that bridge. And when I crossed into Oregon, I was like, oh, right, I'm going to do this culture. I'm doing all of this thing. I mean, I'd only been walking for maybe 3 weeks, and I just kept going.
Yeah.
And it was so healing. I mean, it was because I'd made enough money that we had savings. I did get a settlement, so I had some money, so I wasn't in trouble. And I had a supportive husband who said, you go. But it was one of the best trips. New Zealand was new and different, kind of like, what's this? With my mind being that I'm coming back. And the Pacific Crest Trail was home. It's familiar to me. It's one of the best things I've ever done. 5,000.
So how long did it take you?
Another 5
Oh
months.
my gosh. So you spent 10 out of 12 months walking.
A year on trail.
Oh, wow.
But I came back in November, and the first thing I did, you have a lot of time to think on trail.
Yeah.
And so I made a plan. And I thought, one thing that radio people will do, people will, in anything that they use their voices, is they'll go into voice it. So I came home, and for the month of November, end of November and December, we built a voiceover studio. It's beautiful. It's a double-walled studio. I'm not speaking from it here because I don't have video inside there, but it's great. And I got that together, and it's like, all right, I'm hanging a shingle as a voice artist, got a manager, made demos, had everything going just in time for COVID. I mean, if you ever think to yourself, sometimes you want to have FOMO,
Right.
like fear of missing out. Sometimes you want to get on it because our lives, like the sandfly tells us, our lives are not forever. So something told me to get on it, hike the trail, come home, built the thing, and then I had it for the time of COVID. So I was able to do work from home.
Yeah, that's a very important message too, right? Is sometimes when you have that FOMO, the fear of missing out, you have to listen to that little voice because it's there for a reason, telling you there's something else happening. And again, I think it comes all the way back to what we talked about on that first day of the trail. You didn't know what was going to be the end, but you also then not only went through 2 hikes, but then found yourself coming through the other side probably more prepared than you would have been had you not done both hikes, had you not been let go.
Yeah. I mean, it was wild opportunity. And I think that those are the kinds of messages that people get when you've had a big loss. You're in that state of sorrow, and fear, and everything. So it's hard to hear, but there's a little voice that says, is there silver lining here? What's the phrase? I heard it recently. Sometimes something has to happen so that something else.
That's right.
And I don't really want to accept it. I miss playing flute. I'm much more than I miss radio. I mean, radio was fun, wonderful. The flute, it's my soul.
Yeah.
And I miss it tremendously. I still play, actually professionally,
Okay.
at a church. I play for money. It's one of my freelance jobs, but the music's very easy. So I can kind of fake it. I just can't play advanced music. I couldn't play an orchestra or as a soloist anymore. I just don't know what technique. I simply cannot move this finger to that finger without it going into a claw. So I just kind of play on the tips. Sometimes losing something can, as you pointed out, Adele, like this, you had this feeling you're starting to go back to your life and reclaim your life. It's like you were already tending that garden and not knowing. You had no way of knowing. And it was a shock.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think with me, I got to the point that when it happened and I went through all of the feelings and I did all of the things, it was at the end of it that I realized that I was not being punished. I was being pushed. I was being pushed into where I am at today. And I said since I was a little girl, I wanted to travel the world and train people. And it was something where I was training my mom's gift shops when I was 8 years old. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I built a great career doing it at Dell. And so that's why it was so hard for me, because it was like I had only done it at one company. But I was the one that did it. This was now my opportunity to share my stories and spread my message and empower other people to do their best job and to show up for themselves, regardless of what that looks like every day. And I had the opportunity to do it under my own name, not with someone else's name associated with it for the first time. But it took me a while to get there. But we all go through it. And, the name that you have built for yourself now, not under anyone else's name, and the stories that you are sharing with people, had you stayed in radio, maybe that may not have happened. In the fact that you can still play music, even though it's not as advanced, you found a way, right? You did a small pivot from something very complex to something easier, but it still allowed you to do what you love and expand into something else you love to do. It's a win-win.
I'm very lucky. I'm very, very lucky. I think that at this point, everyone who's listening or watching should take out a Post-it note and write that down. I wasn't being punished. I was being pushed. And that's just, that is such wisdom, because it takes us out of that personal place.
It does.
I mean, Richard said to me, they didn't take a microphone away from us. You stay like that. So in the voiceover studio, when I came home and started my podcast, which is a little different than that. I don't interview people, but I tell stories from the trail and style. It's very public radio sounding. But that's kind of gone into writing and then speaking. The speaking is just completely by accident. The retirement community asked me to come in and talk about the Te Araroa, just share pictures. And I liked it so much, and I'm good at it, and people laughed at my jokes. I thought, this is kind of cool. And again, I have a support system that pushed me and said, you should try to do more. You should make some of these messages because people need to hear not so much about what the trail looked like, but what it felt like as you went back to that first day. It's so funny, the first day of New Zealand, the first campsite had a name, Twilight Campsite.
Okay.
I'm sure it was named that because of its location on the ocean, thinking of the sun going down. But twilight has this meaning of obscurity, not being able to see clearly. And it's like, well, you have no idea what's coming. And so the biggest lesson all of life is to be curious rather than certain, to cultivate that feeling of comfort in a place of the unknown and keep stepping forward.
I think a lot of times what happens is that people get comfortable. And once they're comfortable, they don't want to push those boundaries. Sometimes it's because they have been told not to, or sometimes that they're just scared. But they're called growing pains for a reason. Because if you're comfortable, you're not growing. And if you're growing, you're not comfortable. And sometimes it's a fine line, but it's okay, because if you take one step out of your comfort zone and you take one small action every single week for a year, you've done 52 things to get you to where you want to be.
Really? Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. And it's kind of like the spreadsheets when you see it breaks it down into something small. It doesn't feel like that I need to change.
Yes.
It's like, that's just this one
Yeah.
thing. Oh, that's so
Yeah. And I honestly don't recommend just blowing up your life completely to start over, but that's a whole different episode. No,
Well,
I really appreciate you taking the time to sit here today and to share your story. I knew how powerful it was, and I knew how powerful of a speaker you were even prior to our conversation today. But I want to thank you again for sharing it. And as we look at wrapping up the time here today, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
yeah, I mean, I think that when people ask what was the one piece of advice and to be curious rather than certain is the most important one. I just gave a talk recently with these different sayings from the hiker worlds, like never quit on a bad day or embrace the suck. That's a good one. Especially when you're involved. And getting to this a bit of a spiritual place, they talk about the trail will provide. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was in the North Island of New Zealand. And it was another American hiker. And he said, it just always seems that like things kind of come up, work out in surprising ways, and people help you. And sometimes you can be the person who creates the trail magic. You can offer that. That may be one of the reasons why I choose the term thriver rather than survivor. Survivor does feel a little bit like you've been victimized. So there's that whole energy around it. But also, none of us will survive life. I mean, we'll eventually die.
Right.
And not all of us can survive terrible things. Some of us will die from cancer. Now, why yet, right? The question is, like Mary Oliver said, what are you going to do with this one all the wonderful life? I choose to thrive in that space as much as I can. Step out 52 weeks of the year within my comfort zone so that I can find a space of thriving. Place to walk. So I guess that's
that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And for anyone out there that is watching or listening to this, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend that could learn from this message. Till next week, stay fierce, stay bold, but most importantly, stay unapologetically you.